morning,
everyone.
Sam. Oh, there it says.
Good
Get the red
morning.
live button now.
Yeah, absolutely. Welcome to the session. And we are going to talk today around discovery and the whole kind of process of how we run a sales discovery process. I want to introduce Peter. So Peter, would you like to kind of introduce yourself while I get the slides up?
Sure. Good morning, Sam. Peter Jekyll from Hands Free. Got 30 plus years in the ERP trenches. Started off at Price Waterhouse implementing Mapix, and have implemented, sold, and fixed a wide variety of ERP packages. And I guess big Discover fan for what, 3-4 years now? I lost track of time.
Excellent. So trying to get Richard to get the slides on the screen. Can you put brilliant. So what we will discuss in this session is really the kind of the art of discovery. So we know that delivering business applications projects is not the easiest thing in the world as a customer and also a partner in this ecosystem. And really what we want to discuss today is how do we kind of make that process better, easier, more streamlined, but ultimately de-risk it. So when we talk about discovery, in my simple mind, I've been in this ecosystem similar length of time to you, Peter, in terms of selling, implementing, deploying business applications. So I won't disclose how old I am, but we ran around the track a few times. But ultimately, when we use the word discovery in the world of biz apps, I think we talk about understanding the customer's needs and requirements, and that's us as a supplier, but also the customer understanding their own needs and their own requirements for what they're trying to do when putting in a system, understanding the investment requirement, and then having a clear understanding of the scope that we're going to deliver in this project. So that's kind of a summary level what I think discovery is. Anything you'd like to add to that, Peter?
Oh no, I found it. When you first introduced the topic to me, I was immediately intrigued by what you said you had built, and then when I saw it, I was immediately. At the time, I never thought I would sell ERP without that tool again. So, I got it right. I got it right away.
Cool. And yes, we've got tools, but also the actual process, even without the tooling, it's kind of important. So what I thought we'd do is as we go into kind of the next 25 minutes, I've got some discussion topics that we can have, and if any of the audience wants to ask questions, feel free to throw them in as well. So we've got a few topics here. We'll kind of tackle them one by one, which probably lead to greater discussion. So again, not here to promote Guide 365 per se, but it really around the process, why discovery is important. I mean, the first question really is, why is important? I speak to a whole variety of customers and sellers, and I've had customers in the past saying, come and give me a quote for my project. I'll give you 5 minutes or 15 minutes. And it's like, I'm not going to quote for your business in 15 minutes. And maybe you're making this big investment for your future of your business, and you're not willing to spend more than 15 minutes. So why, in your terms, Peter, why do you think discovery is an important aspect for both suppliers and customers?
Yeah, so in my business of implementing and fixing projects over the years, one of the things that, I stood on a stage 10 years ago and said that based on my 3 simple criteria of ERP success: on time, on budget, and delivering, expected functionality, there are no successful projects. And when you start drilling down into why there is so much, failure and challenges in our industry, you start drilling down into what I eventually did is this 5 whys of trying to drill down of why are there so many problems in projects. And so I use this 5 whys methodology to try to drill down into the root cause. And so the problem is that so many of these projects go over budget, they go over time, and they're not delivering exactly what was promised in that sales demo. And even the projects that go live on a kind of a timely basis, what you really find is they're limping along, and then it's a couple of years later that they're actually up and running better. So what's the problem? Over budget, over time, right? Not delivering things. Well, what we're finding when we drill down is that there are project plan errors. And so somebody is working based on a project plan, and somewhere along executing that project, they run into an issue that causes all of these monetary and time issues. Well, we've all been implementing this software forever, and there is so much information out there on how to do it correctly. How is it possible that we have a bad project plan? Well, typically what you're going to do is critical missed requirements that are missed by customers. And if we have all this experience in figuring out what customers need, how is it possible that we're missing requirements? Well, when you drill down a little bit further, there's a couple of ways that people really figure out how they want to have what their requirements are. Some people do it by just going out and asking for a software demo, and whatever software they like, they go ahead and they never bother with the requirements gathering. But for those folks that gather requirements, there's a couple of traditional ways that people get requirements. RFP process, right? All of that stuff. And number one is you have kind of the industry tools that are provided by software publishers. They're kind of freebies, and they're only about a 1/4 inch deep. They don't have a lot of sophistication, and their intention is basically to guide you in a specific direction and a specific software. Unintentional use of the word guide, Sam. The other methodology is the consultant-led requirements project. And those can literally be tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars, take weeks and months to run. Here's a fascinating thing. I have run those on my own and seen a lot of those in business and industry. And most of those requirements gathering projects, they're judged on the weight of the document that's delivered. So I've seen these, right, with 10, 20, 30,000 questions. If we've all seen those, right? And most of those questions are typically more of a generic and very specific, screen by screen questions that are a complete waste of time. So what ends up happening is you're missing, in that huge forest of these minutia type questions, you're missing real critical stuff. And then the other things that we find is that a lot of those surveys are being administered by the lowest person on the totem pole. Your junior consultants are being sent out with these long checklists, and they're just answering yes or no. Now, here's the issue with those yeses or nos. Somebody without experience, they don't have that ability to drill down and say, hey, this is a more sophisticated question. This isn't just how long is your item number. This is, what's your RMA process, and can you explain it to me? So the fundamental methodology for people identifying their requirements is fundamentally broken because it's too simple, it doesn't happen at all, or it's too complicated and it's missing critical stuff. So why is that? Well, there haven't been any really great tools that advance the art of requirements gathering until we have this automated tool that you guys brought to the market called Discover. And, what I have found there is that it has compressed those tens of thousands of questions into a small number of very critical business requirements that have to do with, this is important to the business, right? We're not trying to identify how many questions can we ask to deliver this huge document. And because it's so elegant and easy to fill out and it focuses on critical requirements, we're now able to gather those requirements at a fraction of the cost, a fraction of the time. And much more importantly, you're looking at actual good data for having done this for such a long period of time, as opposed to that junior consultant that's never done this, or that consulting firm that has their own tool and they do 2 a year. So what the Discover process fixes, what the Discover process fixes and the tool fixes is that root cause that we found that's causing a lot of the problems on these projects being over budget and over time.
Thanks, Peter. And I think, my perspective of this is that you're doing this for a reason, right? So we're doing this to understand or really deal with pain points. That pain point could be, our legacy platform is out of date, which is a problem in itself. But more typically, it's we've got a business pain. We've got something that's not right, and we need to address that. And I think going down to the roots, we've seen them before. Customers produce RFP documents with 20,000 lines, and line 10 has a massive conflict with line 10,055, and is like, well, where's the thinking behind that? And you can't. And that was kind of the logic when we built our application. Our first version did have close to 50,000 requirements, to be honest. But you start to hone in to say, actually, what are the critical areas that we need to hone in on? And we can always dive in deeper, right? Because the devil is in the detail. But if you can hone in on those key areas and the key pain points, it does kind of help that. Now, from a customer point of view, why do you think it's worth? I mean, you highlighted some of the points there, but what should they look for when they're doing a process of needs identification with a third party? When you speak to your customers, what do you make sure they understand about the process you go through?
So let me answer that question with what I tell my customers to avoid. And Discover allows me to avoid the following. The typical process that we've learned over the years, especially if you come from, larger systems implementation, is there is this process where we want to come out and I know everything that you guys do. We want to map your current processes. We want to totally understand how your business runs today. And we want to detail, in great detail what it is and how you do it today. And to me, most companies have a Frankenstein system, meaning that it's not perfect. It just was built up over time from various spare parts out of necessity. So here's what I ask my customers. I don't care what your Frankenstein looks like. You shouldn't care either, because identifying what you did to get to here is just a waste of time. Let's identify where we want to be. And instead of answering and building our requirements based on here's what we've been doing forever, and oh, by the way, let's replicate that in the new system, forget that. Let's make believe that we're starting with that blank screen and we're saying, here are the things ideally we want to be able to do in the system moving forward. And that's where we develop, that list of here are the absolutely critical requirements. Here are the things that we should have, and here are the future state items that we'd like to create. And so what that does is it totally misses that huge front step where people are documenting the mess that they currently have. And this is worse. And then what a lot of these processes do is, okay, let's build that ideal environment that you want. And then let's draw a map of how we get to where you are today to where we're going. Absolutely huge waste of time. If we can get directly and quickly to that, here's where we want to be, and try to get people to put that older process in the rearview mirror, it's a much better use of time. And the tools, that whole Discover process starts with that vision instead of, a bunch of, diagramming the Frankenstein.
Yeah, so really focus on the needs as opposed to the as is where we are today, right?
Yeah.
A lot of consulting firms, you probably made a lot of money in the past by doing that sort of process, right? Only cheesy.
I, I confess, which is why I've evolved to the point where I can say, look, here's how we wasted a bunch of time and money.
For
And
sure.
here's a much better way of doing it.
And I know when we've been prepping this session, what was really interesting is we took about discovery as a time, a point in time where a customer does it, as in when they're looking for a new system. But you also highlighted some yes, which I found really interesting, how maybe customers should do it on a regular basis. So,
Yeah.
you know, to kind of evaluate where they are today, even if they're not looking to replace systems, they're doing a kind of a bit of a sanity check of where they are today.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I use Discover in two ways, I think, very uniquely. I started off using it in the partner model as a salesperson. And, the question up there is, when should you position it? The first time you talk to somebody. As a salesperson, the first time you talk to somebody and say, look how cool we are, and look how we can. But that's a side point. So, what was the question? I lost.
Oh yeah, when
Yeah.
can you do it more than once?
Yeah. So what surprised us when we started working with end customers on helping them identify their requirements to help them be better consumers of ERP, we thought that all of our customers would be the traditional, hey, we're ready to move into an ERP. We want to publish an RFP. We want to get a demo. So we thought that was the traditional methodology. What surprised us is we've ended up working with a lot of customers that come to us and say, I don't know if I picked the wrong software or if I have a bad implementation partner. Can you run my requirements using this tool set and tell me if I'm a match? And that match will then tell us that, yes, I picked the right software, but my partner is doing a bad job. Or I underbought, and I always tell people underbuying and overbuying are just as bad. And the most unique, use of the tool we got was a company that had just finished installing a enterprise version software solution at headquarters, and now they were about to roll it out to about 10, satellite offices. And they came to us and said, headquarters took way longer than we thought, took a lot more money. And now, before we roll this out to these other 10 satellite locations, do we really need this? Or do we take a step back and have a lighter solution because it meets our needs, but it's going to take us a heck of a lot less time and money? So there's been some absolutely fascinating, applications of the Discover process for not only companies, looking for a budget for a year down the road, or a sanity check against what competing partners are telling them, or an implementation plan, budget, et cetera, to a mid-implementation process. Hey, are we going in the right direction?
Absolutely. And I think especially the rate of change of technology in the world today, with you might have heard of this thing called AI. You might have come across it, but that has an impact in how a business may want to look at their organization, and that the evolution of most customers' business models will require that a more regular review point and checklist of is the business system requirements fit for where we want to be as an organization. So I think that it is an interesting point that I think we'll see more of that sort of ongoing regular, a bit like in a manufacturer where you have your regular stock takes of your inventory. I think your regular sanity check of your requirements and business application needs probably needs to be baked in, and maybe that's something partners should look at.
Yeah.
We touched on AI. So if we look at how partners run these, suppliers run these discovery processes, a question to you, and you do this day in, day out, way more than I do. Surely Copilot can do this. We don't need humans to do this.
Yeah, people always ask me this. The folks that over the weekend created their own ERP replacement for SAP, right? Because they vibe coded it. And I have a very specific story based on based on real life experience here of doing a lot of these. And here's what I tell folks. Let's imagine for a second, we break Discover down into two critical pieces of information that you as the customer have to have. Number one is the gap fit. How do your application requirements match different ERP solutions? So let's assume for a second, and this is a huge assumption, that you know how to create a list of requirements. Whenever I see companies create their own list of requirements, they're ridiculous. They're like 10 things from 10 different people in the company, and everybody has easy to use, right? Okay. That's not a set of requirements. That's a wish list, right? So the first thing is, how are you going to build that great list of things that you need to identify? Discover has that. The second thing is, when you're analyzing those requirements against what various software products are able to do, and you use Google or you use one of these AI tools, what are you going to get? You're probably you get an answer, not the answer, because all of these tools are intended to go find the first answer that looks good to them and return that to you. Most likely what you're going to get is a bunch of sales and marketing stuff, because the vast amount of information floating around on the internet that an AI tool or Google picks up are the sales and marketing, blogs and information where everything works. So that's the major, downfall on the requirement side. And the second part, where, the Discover tool brilliantly allows you to estimate the required time and resources to implement something, that information is not available anywhere. So you can Google and you can AI until the machine blows up, but you can't find it. So to me, in a lot of cases, that second bit of data is at least 50% of the weight and importance for somebody, and you can't even find it. So the first one is sketchy at best. The second one is impossible. So good luck vibe coding this on the weekend and replacing it.
Absolutely. And I think, just going back to, I guess, the other, how should a partner run a good discovery process? And I think, our tool, and I will touch on the platform, but it's a way of capturing information, but it's still, and we get this from partners a lot, in saying, if three of us in the deal are all competing, we're all using the platform, how do I differentiate, right?
Yeah.
And I said, capturing the requirements is one aspect. Is how do you analyze that data? How do you then advise the customer on, do you really need this requirement? Is it really going to impact you upon your major priorities? Is it something you could move to a phase 2? Is it, you've got this requirement that's probably a gapping in the target solution you're looking to deploy? Is it super important? And that's where I think the partner's expertise, their industry experience, that's where they've got to shine, right? And that's where 3 or 4 partners competing can have a differentiator, even they're using our tooling, right?
Yeah, I'm going to give you a couple of what I think are unique ways that I've used the platform by using it so many times, and so I've stumbled on some things. So the first thing I do is I try to introduce people to the platform as quickly as possible, because it does differentiate you from a level of professional being able to do something better than somebody that's just pulling out their notepad to take, answer questions. But what I do is I do the following: is I present the list of questions in, your typical business area format initially. So, here are questions about financials, here are questions about inventory, et cetera. And what I tell people is, look, instead of being overly worried about the answers and building a huge team to come in and, every bunch of inventory guys answer the inventory questions, et cetera, say find your 2 or 3 folks. Every company has these that kind of know everything, right? Everybody knows those folks in the company. Try to get through that first set of questions as rapidly as possible. Just your first gut instinct, answer those questions and get those answers in there as quickly as possible. The vast amount of time, 99% of those questions will be right the first time around. There's going to be questions they don't understand, and they're going to leave those blank. But here's the first tip. You can come back and create expertise by walking them through those questions they didn't know how to answer. So now they either didn't know the question, what the question meant, or they didn't know how the question impacted them in their business. It's a super opportunity for you to show how expert you are in that industry and in ERP functionality. Second thing I do is say, okay, we've got them all answered. Now here's what we're going to do. We're going to flip them into business process view. And now all of those questions, requirements are going to be jumbled. Instead of being in, a functional area, they're not going to follow a business process the way a modern cloud-based ERP thinks of following steps to complete a business process. Now go back with some folks in that business areas and now take a look at those questions that you answered in context of a business process flow. And what I find is that because now you're starting to, cross functional areas for a business process, people develop knowledge they didn't have before. They have empathy, right? Oh my God, I didn't realize I was doing this and that was causing you problems down here. So it creates this learning environment out of the chute that switching from those two methodologies for looking at questions, adds to the process. Then after that second pass, you have to have somebody analyze the data that has some experience. Because Sam, you said it, I use this term all the time, the devil's in the details. I have seen, application gap fits where there was one application that off the shelf 60%, the other application 90%, and people say, look, it's a clear winner over here. I said, yes, probably, but let's take a look at what that 40% ISV solutions are and if they're critical for you. And it turns out they weren't. And so now a customer, by being able to drill into that level, they were able to come back and say, yes, we can do this solution because it's going to save us, a tremendous amount of time and money. And then the last thing I tell everybody is, look, there is always a difference between things that you're able, to answer in a questionnaire and what an experienced person sees when they look at your inventory or walk your shop floor. So at that point, hopefully what you've done is you've developed the trust to allow them to have you on site. Take a look at their inventory, right? Take a look at their processes, walk a shop floor if it's manufacturing. And now all of a sudden, there's going to be some critical things that can never be captured in the same way. And now you've got a totally different relationship with the customer because you've added this tremendous amount of knowledge and capability to the process.
So you become that trusted advisor, right? Not just a salesperson.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, Preet, I think we're at the end of the time slot. So I really appreciate your insights. We, if anybody's interested in understanding more about the Guide platform, we've got details here, but also equally, if any customers, that are interested in looking at the, really discovery process for any of their business application needs, or any partners want support in terms of how Peter goes about it, there's the details for hands-free there. So thank you all for joining, and thank you, Peter, very much. And
thank you, Sam. Appreciate the time. You have a great day.